Hi, I'm Ellie Vates for the Heart Temple.
And I'm Nick Ribera with Chain Assembly.
And together we've designed a project called Women's Wheel.
It's based on the philosophy of women evolving with the seasons.
And new modern archetypes that exist within those seasons.
This new way of thinking is presented in a core set with many items and activities designed to further understanding between you and the women around you.
Much more than self-help, these tools are for one or more participants in a community growing setting.
Learn more about the Women's Wheel core set and its development at www.womenswheel.co. I'm joined by Billy Blue today, who is an artist and illustrator. Billy Blue has some really cool designs he's done for some different role-playing games and other projects. Lots of high fantasy, but some cool splatterpunk looking stuff. And Billy, thank you for taking the time to join me.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you introduce yourself a bit and tell me a bit about your art and how you got into the position you're doing now?
Like you said, I do art for role-playing games. I do a lot of fantasy things and like kind of Morkborg related type of artwork, if you guys are familiar with that. I really enjoy that style of work and I do a lot of it, but honestly, I can do any style. So sometimes people are surprised to see some of my work and think like, oh, I didn't know you could do this kind of work. So like you said, I can do some high fantasy stuff. I do the splatterpunk type stuff. I can do, cartoony stuff, things like that. But I just like making pictures, and I just like role-playing games. So where those two things intersect is where I like to be.
So how did you start with the commissions? Where did it begin?
I've been doing it off and on for quite a few years, but honestly, the thing that really kickstarted it was the pandemic. So for about 15 years, I was working in the service industry and just kind of doing a little bit of art on the side and not really having enough time to take it seriously. But once the pandemic hit and my wife and I had to make some like financial adjustments to survive, that's when we decided like, hey, maybe since I'm stuck in the house, maybe I can start pursuing this. And one thing led to another. And it's been going pretty well so far. So that's been about, 2.5, 3 years or so. And I really just got my start by putting myself out there on the various groups, mostly Facebook. I was kind of doing everything for a while, whether it was Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. But Facebook is really the one that gave me the most feedback. Someone would say, hey, you got cool stuff. And then we would talk and I'd do a piece and then, I'd share that piece and then more people would notice and it kind of snowballed from there. So I really feel very fortunate that I took a chance and it's working and I'm able to pursue it. And that actually led me to, getting all these commissions led me to being able to design my own game, which is cool because I've always approached things from the visual part of it, of course, as an artist. And I never really thought of myself as a designer, but just being in those circles and having to work on one side of the project, the art side, and getting to communicate with all the design people, it really gave me a lot of good information and a lot of good background, and also just playing a lot of games every week, So I branched out into design and doing that now, and so that's where it is at the moment.
Okay. My art business, Chain Assembly, primarily started with commissions. And in prep for this meeting, I just looked at where I am for this year. And only 6% of my business this year has been commission-based, which surprised me. I thought it'd be a lot higher. But when I started, the first 2 years, it was nothing but commissions. And the name of my business, Chain Assembly, refers to the top part of a disc golf basket because I started by doing art for disc golf tournaments and clubs, and I'm pretty much become like the go-to guy around Florida for disc golf related events. And it was probably like maybe a year and a half into it that I incorporated to try and do everything official. So, are you incorporated as an illustration company?
No, I thought about it, but really I have just decided to kind of keep it um, very kind of low key. Um,
Hmm.
I I don't even use contracts very often. For the bigger jobs, I will, and for some clients, I will. But I think it mostly was because when I first started, I was doing a piece for, or two for a person, and then I would never talk to them again. So it was just the nature of the business where it was very much like, here's my money, here's my image, and then we're done. So it was just kind of very quick and simple kind of transactions, and I just kind of kept that as much as I could. Um, I've fortunately, knock on wood, I've only really been burned one time, and I was able to dispute it and get a refund. And it was just by someone who was a known scammer. So, I use contracts when I need to, and I haven't done any kind of S corp or C corp or anything like that yet. But I think maybe if it gets bigger and I branch out to a certain point, then I will need to.
I think, well, in my regard, the most fun part about incorporating was I get to then decide what becomes a business expense. So
Mm-hmm.
I can
Mm-hmm.
easily translate the money I'm making into better equipment, like nicer computer and nicer
Mm-hmm.
microphone and things like that. And I really kind of start to I mean, that is one thing that helped morph what my business became, because I can
Mm-hmm.
spend money in things that are tangentially related to what I was doing, and then that opens up a whole new revenue stream. Like, I guess
Yeah.
a good example would be a $1,200 printer. So now I can make my own G Clay prints and sell those at events and stuff, rather than having to offload them to a printing company. So that's
Yeah.
just
That makes
kind of an
sense. Yeah.
example.
It makes sense. It seems like it would make it a little easier to justify some of those expenses that you normally wouldn't be able to, because it's for the business. Like
Yeah.
you can write it off, or at least partially write it off, and then hey, now you're able to take a chance.
Well, I guess on my side too, it helped that I started off all by just doing it as supplementing my already existing income.
Mm-hmm.
In your regard, you're using it to bring in money to replace
Mm-hmm.
the income from the service industry that kind of
Mm-hmm.
shut down during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your pricing structure. How has that changed since you started 2.5 years ago?
Um, it has almost doubled, I guess, if just to be rough about the numbers, but I started off pretty low and just kind of kept inching it up little by little. Like a lot of people, when I first started, I didn't know how to price. And not only did I not know how to price, but I had this mentality of, since I am new at this, I'm going to keep my prices low. And I think that there's some logic to that, but I think that also what a lot of what a lot of artists forget is that for the most part, nobody knows that you're new at this unless you tell them. And it's not like you have a big sign on your forehead that says "I just started." So if you handle yourself in a certain professional way and with a certain level of confidence, people respond to that. And it's like anything where value is a funny concept, and the perceived value of something can be manipulated very easily. So if I walk up to you and I say, "Hey, I have this thing for $1," you assume I could take it or leave it because it's not that important, it's not that valuable. But if I say I have this thing and it's $100, you think, "Ooh, man, I don't know if I can afford that, but it seems really valuable." And it's this funny thing that humans do where um, we kind of just accept whatever the stated value of something is. I mean, it's the reason why like diamonds are so valuable, like because we say they are. And it's like a lot of new artists, they have this perception that I can't charge, quote, real prices because I'm not there yet. And it's like, you know what? That's the wrong way to look at it. Look at it as far as what are the people with a similar skill level to you charging? That should be your baseline. Um, and once I figured that out, I was able to kind of adjust my prices upwards. Um, and like I said, over the last couple of years, they've uh, basically doubled. Also, a really helpful thing is that when I first started, like I said, I was getting, a commission from some guy, who just wanted a picture of his OC, you know. So it's like he doesn't have very much money to spend, and that's why he just wants one small picture of his favorite character. But nowadays I'm doing things for bigger clients. So such and such games will contact me and say like, hey, we need 10 quarter page pieces. Can you give us a quote? That's a completely different type of client and a completely different type of job and a completely different type of budget. So starting off and doing those small jobs, um, it did help me get to a place where I was noticed enough that the bigger companies would then inquire, and then I was able to price accordingly. And it's honestly it, being just candid and professional with my clients has been the biggest factor in me raising my prices, because there's a couple of clients that I've had over the years who um, I've been able just to speak very openly and honestly with, and I just asked them, like, hey, what do you think of my prices, and I won't get offended, and they would give me advice, and amazingly, one or two of them said, hey, you should charge more for your stuff, like, and they said, hey, this is an admission against interest, because they want to save money by hiring me, but they also know they got to do what's right, and so that was really helpful. Also connecting with other artists, you know, we all we all hang out, we all talk, and we kind of get a sense of what other people are charging. So if I know like Joe Blow over there is charging 3 times what I'm charging and he's getting clients, well then I can probably raise my prices by 30% and not shoot myself in the foot. And after you do that for a few months, you're like, maybe I can do 20% more, things like that. So there's a lot of things that go into it, uh, and it is kind of going by feel to a certain degree, but also a lot of it is just confidence and saying, hey, I'm worth something, and my time and my skill is worth a certain amount. So this is what I think it's worth.
So I definitely went through a similar journey, like right off the bat when I was beginning. Just like you said, I felt like I was a nobody, so I charged nobody prices. I started off at $15 an hour because I said, I don't want to do minimum wage, but I want to do something close to it. And
well, what was comparatively, what was minimum wage to you at that time?
This was, I guess, maybe 4 years ago. So minimum wage is like $10 or something. I mean, like national minimum wage. I don't know what it is. I haven't earned the minimum wage in a while. Yeah. So that's kind of what I was
in California, so ours is high.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm in Florida. We have no rights. So, right. So that's kind of how I initiated
it. Real life Florida man.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Born and raised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm actually working on a Florida. I'm actually working on a Florida man themed role playing game. But anyways.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah. I got to hear more about this.
It's still in the planning phases. But anyways, we'll save that for the role play game talk towards the end.
Okay.
So yeah. So I started off with the $15 an hour, and each year I increased it, and I've kind of been stagnant in the last year and a half or so. I have not raised my prices, and I know I'm woefully undercharging for things. But at this point, because it's become such a small factor of the business, I'm really only doing it for people who like I'm friends with, and just like as small favors to people. I don't really pursue large commission clients, mostly because in my mind, if I spend an hour designing something for somebody else, I get paid once. If I spend an hour designing something for myself, I'll get it funded through Kickstarter. I'll get multiple copies printed, and I'll be able to sell it for the next 2 years. So So that's one reason why I don't want to fill my time with commissions. So that's kind of, I guess, how I ended up. Right now, I just charge $30 an hour, which is still way too cheap. And that's kind of become my default price for anything, whether I'm doing like headshots with photography or building 3D models of people's projects and stuff. No matter what it is, that's kind of doing research for someone on how to find the best wallpaper printer. No matter what it is, I'm just charging $30 an hour, and I typically do a 2-hour minimum. So because I do it by hour, I don't do it by project. Do you do by hour or by project?
It's funny. I do it by project, but after a while, I realized that the project fees that I had settled on are actually really close to $30 an hour, or like depending on the project. Sometimes it's like $60 an hour. So yeah, I and the reason why I do it by project is I do it also by size. So since I do a lot of work that is meant to be printed, my pricing structure breaks down to like this much of the page equals this many dollars. Because the logic is that the bigger the image, the more detail and the more time you're going to have to put into it. So something that's only 2 inches square.
Because it's fascinating because looking at your website, there's not a lot of backgrounds. You do a lot of like one-off character. I'm the same way. I don't like doing backgrounds. I'll just do a solid color, some texture, and call it a day. So if you're pricing things based on like half page, quarter page, full page, it's still usually going to be some type of hero shot, right?
Yeah, and that's mostly just because that's what I like doing the most, and that's just what I get paid, or that's what I get contacted the most for. So, and the logic still is the same. A hero shot that takes up a half a page is still going to take me a lot longer than say a 2-inch square thing of just a character portrait. The environment stuff and things with backgrounds, those almost always tend to be the bigger things. So it just kind of works out that if I do an environment or something, or if I do a scene, I'm going to charge more because you can't cram a scene into a 2-inch spot illustration. So they want all that cool juicy detail to take up a lot of real estate because they want their readers to go, whoa, look at that, So it kind of all just kind of works out.
So what software, if any, do you use to track your commissions and the time you spend on projects?
As far as time tracking, I don't do anything digital. I just look at the clock and kind of make a note. For a while, what I was doing is, as I was painting in Photoshop, I'd say like, okay, I'm done for the night. I would write on a layer. I would just write, 6.5 hours or whatever. And then the next time I opened that file, I'd look at the time. And then when I stopped working for the night, I would just do the math and say, okay, now it's at 9 hours. And that helped me for a while, probably about a year, keep track of how long does a certain type of piece usually take me, ballpark hours. And that is what helped me kind of refine my pricing structure also. So now I know that like, if someone hires me to do a quarter page illustration, it's probably not going to take me longer than, X hours. So I'm comfortable with this price, and like I said, it's already set. So a quarter page is just this price, or a half page is just that price. And it's because I know it's going to take me generally a certain amount of hours.
It's funny too, because yes, you definitely get better over time predicting how long something will take. But aside from that, it's also funny to notice that you really need to increase your prices over time because you become so much more efficient. Because, something that might have taken you 3 hours is now going to take you an hour and a half. So you're losing money because you got better at executing the illustration. So it's always fun trying to balance those things together.
Which is part of the reason why I like a flat rate, is because if a job takes me 1 hour versus 3 hours, I'm still making the same amount of money, which means I'm getting a higher hourly rate. If I charged by the hour every time, it would just be more work mentally for me, and also I would have to adjust it. Like you said, if I go too fast, I'm kind of losing money, kind of a thing. But it's like this way, if I just say it's $200, and if that takes me 2 hours less than I was expecting, bam, my rate just went up, But also, I like knowing this job is going to bring in this amount of money on this date, so I can kind of plan my financial structure around that. Whereas like if it was by the hour, it would be an estimate. And then at the end of the job, I would have this X number, and it would be harder for me to plan in the future for that, not knowing exactly how much it would take. And also when you price that way, I think it necessitates a little bit more of a waiting period at the end of the job because it takes them a while to get those funds together. Whereas if the customer knows I'm spending this amount for this work, they can usually just pay it all up front. Or if they are paying half of it at the end, since they know exactly what that number is going to be, they can prepare for that expenditure and they can pay it more quickly. And I am very fortunate that I have clients, almost all of my clients are able to pay right away.
I'd never considered that, but that is a really good point.
Yeah. It's all about knowing what's ahead of you. The more specifically you can know what's coming, the better you can prepare for it, and the quicker you can respond to it. So that comes on my side as far as doing and planning work, and it also comes on their side as far as paying for the work.
Do you usually request money up front?
Mm-hmm. So the way that I work is 50% is due to start the work. Like I don't even want to make a single mark unless I have received half of the funds. And then the other half is due right before I deliver the final image. The final image with no watermark, high resolution, all that. The whole time I'm sending you sketches and updates and things like that. But yeah, you don't get the final image until I get my money. And that's just, it protects everyone because it's really common. And if you spend a lot of times in the forums, in the artist forums like I do, it's really common for people to get scammed. And I think one of the biggest reasons people get scammed is because they're turning over the work before they have received the money. And some people feel like I don't want to offend my clients, by asking for the money ahead of time, or I'm just trying to be cool with them or whatever. But it's like, if a client is a professional, honest person, then there's zero chance that they're going to get offended by you saying, "Hey, I would like my money," because that's the whole nature of this relationship. They were expecting to give you money. The only people that get offended by you saying, "I want my money," is people who are trying to scam you in the first place. So, that's the advice I like to give to newer people. Is like, they say, "Oh, but I don't know, am I going to offend them by asking for money? Are they going to think I'm going to run away with their money?" And it's like, no, they do this every day. They were contacting you expecting to spend money, so don't worry about asking them for money. And if someone has a problem with paying a deposit, it's either because they just aren't ready to spend the money yet, which is fine. They can wait, or because they were scamming you and they don't have the money. So, like it kind of protects everyone in the relationship to put a pricing structure, a transparent pricing structure in place like that. And there's different ones. Some people say like, oh, a deposit at like 50% complete, and deposit at 75% complete, or whatever. I just like simple, round, easy numbers. I like being able to break things down. 50 now, 50 later, boom, we're done.
I think that's really good insight to kind of call out how that, I don't want to say lack of trust, but
But it is.
That situation, well, that does translate into more of a professional atmosphere. It makes them think, oh, this is not just nobody. I better get my shit together if I want to work with this person. I know I'm definitely too lazy and trusting, I guess, when it comes to the way I deal with those. I always just ask them to pay when it's done. I send them just screenshots throughout the process, not watermarked or anything. And because it's a screenshot, it's not super high res. But if they wanted to, like if I'm doing a logo, they could probably still use it if they needed to. Plus, the invoices I send, the email they get, I use Square to send my invoices. And I just put a link to the files in my Google Drive in that. So they can just click the link, get the files, and not even pay the invoice. I've only had one person ever kind of just disappear in the middle of the process after I'd spent a few hours on their project. So again, I almost all of my commissions are people that I've already done multiple projects with, so I trust them.
Yeah. And that's the thing too is once you start doing this, you'll get a reputation. And
Hmm.
um, a client will talk to their friends and they'll recommend you and they'll say, oh, hey, I heard about you from Joe Blow or whatever. And once you start doing that and you get 3 or 4 or 5 kind of repeat clients, that's a different kind of relationship than, I'm getting a new one-off client, every week, because you have to kind of reestablish that trust every time you're speaking to a new person. But if this is the 10th job I've done for a dude, I trust him, he trusts me, he
Yeah.
knows, and it's the same thing if, oh, my friend recommended you, the kind of trust barrier for entry is a lot lower than getting
Sure.
some random person every time. Um, it's funny that you mentioned Google Drive because I actually use Google Drive for all my clients, and I'm really surprised how often my clients will say like, "Oh, nobody else does this. I wish more people would do this." And I'm like, "This is just easier for me. It's less headache for me to put all of your stuff in one spot, instead of like, where did I put that file on my computer? Like most people, my computer's a mess. My desktop is a mess. It's always changing. And it's like if I just have Google Drive and I know your name has a folder and all your stuff goes in there. So now I don't have to think about it. If I look on my screen in Messenger and oh hey, John is texting me about his commission. Okay, go to my drive, John. Boom, there it is. And it's a lot of my work structure is built around ease of use. For me and also for the client. So um, whether it's invoicing or delivery or storage of files, it's all built around ease of use. And I think that I know that my clients appreciate that because they tell me. They say like some of them will just tell me straight out like, hey, I was kind of nervous hiring you because you're more expensive than this guy and that guy, but I'm really glad I did because your professionalism puts you ahead of them. And I just tell them straight out like, hey, that's one of my selling points. Um, I think it's coming from the service industry because uh, for a long time, uh, when you're a waiter or a server, you're basically selling yourself to a table every time they sit down, and you're not only trying to do the job of getting them their food and drinks, but you're trying to make yourself likable enough to earn extra money on top of that. So what you're doing is you're starting this weird 1 hour relationship with a stranger where you're saying, hey, I really want you to trust me with your food experience, but I also really want you to like me so that you will give me a little extra on top of that. And I really have tried to translate that experience to my commission business because to me, it's kind of the same thing. I'm meeting some guy over the internet who doesn't know me from Adam. He's trusting me with his experience. And if I can make myself likable and professional, he's going to want to come back to me and become a repeat customer. So, and it's working because I've had people tell me like, you do things differently than the other artists I hire, and to me that's a big point of pride for myself because I think that there's 1,000 artists out there and some of them are more expensive, a lot of them are less expensive than me. So what do I have that can set myself apart? It's the quality of my work, and that includes the interactions we have. Do I communicate clearly and professionally? Do I communicate in a timely manner? Do I deliver things in a timely manner? Do I handle revisions well, or am I kind of rolling my eyes at them? Or, am I nickel and diming them and trying to charge them for every single thing? It's like it's a it's a totality of experience, and that's the way I look at it. And I try to kind of make every part of the experience um, a pleasant one for them, within a kind of professional balance, within a reasonable professional balance.
So talking more about the Google Drive situation, the way
Uh-huh.
I have it organized is I have a folder in my Drive called commissions, and within that I have a folder for every single client.
Uh-huh.
And then within each of those folders, I have a folder for each project for that client. So whenever I complete
Yep.
a project, I give them a link to the main folder so that they can be like, oh yeah, I remember these are the files for that. And then
Yep.
the invoices I send, I also tell them I'll delete their stuff after 90 days. And really, I just delete stuff after my drive gets full. And it's always funny that no matter how long I wait, if I delete someone's files within the next few hours, they're going to call me and say, "Hey, what happened to my files?"
Yeah.
And so
See,
I
okay,
have
that's
everything
funny.
backed up anyways through my cloud
That's funny
backup.
because
But
that's one of the points of difference that I chose to make about my work is I actually tell my clients, I will never delete your stuff. And I did that because I know it's a little bit of a headache for me to maintain that much storage space, but I use it as a sales point to justify higher prices because I tell them this is basically like a free backup for you.
sure.
If you ever lose your files get corrupted, you contact me because I have it in the cloud for you forever, you know? And once I started pitching that, people really started to like it because, and again, it's all about that sales experience. I'm basically telling them, here's a reason why you should choose me instead of the other guy. And the other guy has great work and his prices are less than mine, you know, and maybe he's just as friendly and just as quick as I am, but I'm offering you free backup for life. And really, what does it cost me? I mean, right now I spend like $5 for like 200 gigs of Google Drive. Like, you know, that's, to me, that's a more than a fair trade-off to be able to tell my client, I offer this also, you know?
Oh, that's a great point. Like, just between you and I, a client would go to
Mhm.
you, even if the prices are the same, because
Yeah.
I'm annoyed that they don't save the files to their machine. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're making a sales pitch out of something that we're all already doing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
great.
That's just that sales mentality. It's like, and it's, again, I keep going back to the service industry, but the way that I approached, you know, doing that job was basically like, why should you choose me instead of the next guy if we're basically all the same to you, you know? And it's like, so that's the way I approach my business now. It's because these sales points, you know, I offer this, I offer this, I offer this, you know. And my dad actually owns his own business, and he has since I was a kid. And ever since I was like 4 or 5 years old, I would go with him on jobs, and I would observe the way he would talk to customers. And I kind of just got that kind of drilled into me, like a service-minded approach. Like, why should you choose me? You know, and he would tell people, I know my prices are higher than the next guy, but this is why you should choose me. And so just seeing that for so many years, you know, it kind of just now every kind of business conversation that I approach, I'm approaching it with that mindset. I'm looking for those opportunities to say, this is why you should choose me, you know. And the Google Drive, that was one I found.
I think a deeper explanation of the frustration I feel with that, which is even further a great explanation on why you're so much better at working through commissions than I am, is I cannot feign excitement about somebody else's project. And so one of my pet peeves is when someone comes to me and they're like, "Oh, I've got this great idea. It's going to make so much money and I really want
Yeah,
you on board." And
yeah,
like, "Oh, I'm going to bring you up with me. We're both going to get famous together." I'm like, "Dude, just
yeah,
tell me what you want. I don't
yeah, yeah,
Can we get
yeah.
off the call? I'd rather you just email me what you need. I do not want to pretend I
Yeah,
care about your soul searching TikTok project that needs flashing
yeah,
graphics."
yeah. And it's honestly, and it's just a rehash of something I've seen 1,000 times already.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know what? You know what the solution is for that for me? I handle almost 100% of my business through Facebook Messenger. That way,
Okay.
I don't have to have that face-to-face contact, um, because I actually um, I deal with a lot of anxiety issues, and um, being face-to-face with someone actually causes me a lot of anxiety sometimes. Um, and even this interview that we're doing now, which I know the visual component won't be released to anyone, it still made me really nervous. And I'm like, I gotta get ready. I gotta put on the shirt. I gotta comb my hair. And it's like, it almost felt like I was getting ready for a first date. And it's like, so, which is stupid because no one's ever going to see this, you know, they're just going to hear my
Mhm.
voice, which I'm okay with. But it kind of translates to that same thing. Like, being face to face with someone kind of is nerve wracking. So I just eliminated that from my process, you know, and it actually has a really good side benefit, which is I have a really terrible memory. So it's really useful to me to go to Facebook Messenger and I can just scroll up and see, oh, yeah, that was a quarter page illustration he wanted. And then I don't have to ask that question of the client again because asking the same question over and over gets annoying to anyone. So, and I tell them, like, hey, I prefer to do my communication through Messenger because I can refer back and, you know, double check things and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, um, and I just think that it's a quick and easy way to work, and it's a little less clunky than email. So that's what I've been using for the last couple of years, and it's served me really well.
I use a free service called Clockify, which is great for tracking your multiple projects. You can enter clients, have contact information for them, list projects underneath them, and then assign tasks. It's designed for multiple people, but I just use it for myself. Really, I hit the start button on a project when I work on something, and then I hit stop when I'm done, and that tracks how long I've spent on a project. And you can use that to easily translate that into an invoice. But aside from that, yeah, it's free. It's great. But the software I use for art, and we can go deeper into drawing software later, but I use Clip Studio Paint, and they just announced a feature that actually tracks how long you're working on a file from like first mark to last mark. And you could choose how it's like when it stops counting, which I would love to try. But that's the first feature in their new subscription service. So wow. I don't know if I need that yet, but
I think every program should have that.
I know.
You know what? Just like every program. Sorry, go ahead.
There's got to be some type of third-party Windows app that will track how long you're in an active piece of software. Like if your phone can track how long you have an app open,
exactly.
A computer should be able to do that too.
Yeah,
but I just use Clockify for all my time tracking.
Yeah, I like that. You know, I think every drawing app should also have a time-lapse recording option, like
Clip Studio Paint has that built in. Yeah,
that's amazing. Why doesn't Photoshop have that?
Oh, Clip Studio Paint is better for illustration in just about every regard.
You know, I've heard that from a lot of people.
All right, well, let's do it. Let's talk about software.
Okay, let's do it.
So the reason why I use Clip Studio Paint primarily was when I first started my art business, I was using a bamboo tablet on a very old tower PC. And Photoshop could not handle any strokes.
Yeah.
But Clip Studio Paint is way better at being adaptive to crappier computers. So as a result, that's what I ended up learning on. After that, I upgraded to a Surface Pro 6, which had just come out and was like the bee's knees because I could run the full Adobe suite on a tablet PC. Still, you know, I don't. Are you Windows or Mac?
I'm Windows.
Awesome. I'd shake your hand if we could. Do you ever see people drawing on Procreate and you're like, come on, man? Anyways, I'll alienate a lot of listeners if I go down that road.
Yeah, no, I get a little bit jealous because Procreate is a really great program. And I'm like, please just make it for Windows. I just want to screw around with Procreate, you know, and I don't want to have to jump through some hoops.
What I think for me, the biggest issue with drawing on an iPad is after you do the drawing, then what? You can't really open up Photoshop, create multiple versions, vectorize it in Illustrator. And then like there's so many things that I do with the illustration after I'm done with the illustration that I would then need to move the file from an iPad to a computer. So why not just draw right on the computer?
See, I don't have that issue because basically when I am done drawing, I'm done. And that's one of the things I like about the work that I do. I try to approach it like a traditional artist, and because that's my background, that's my training. I started with traditional medium, and then I moved over to digital. So basically, when my last stroke is done, I put the pencil down, and I'm done. I ship it. So an app like Procreate would work well if I had a Mac, but yeah.
So some of my favorite features about Clip Studio Paint that I don't believe Photoshop has. Does Photoshop have symmetrical rulers?
Do you mean like a symmetry feature where it
Yeah.
draws for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't call them
Okay,
that, but
cool.
yeah, they have that. They actually,
Awesome.
okay, this is the funny thing. I use Photoshop and I love it and I've used it for a lot of years, but I also recognize that it's not the best thing that I could be using. It's just the thing that I'm the most comfortable with using.
Right.
And it's almost like when people, so it's almost like when people, they'll kind of make fun of like Apple products because like, oh, Apple just got this new feature, and they're like, yeah, Android had that 5 years ago. You know, it's like that's kind of the situation Photoshop is in sometimes, where they're like the biggest dog on the block, but they're also kind of the slowest to adapt sometimes.
Last year, Clip Studio Paint introduced some AI features, and all of the users got really pissed at them for doing that. So then they rolled it all
Mm-hmm.
back. Meanwhile,
Oh, good.
Photoshop is like, we don't care. Because I
Yeah.
mean, the people who are against it made a great point. We don't want our clients see us using a software and then wonder if we just generated what we delivered.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that definitely made some great sense. But the number one
Yeah.
feature I use in Clip Studio Paint that I cannot do in Photoshop, in CSP, you can create raster layers and vector layers on the same file.
Oh,
So,
how neat. Oh, wow.
yeah, so any of my line art, I always do that on a vector layer. And it has this really great feature where it's kind of hard to describe, but when you erase a line on a vector layer, it erases all the way up until the next intersection. So you don't really need to slow down to make sure your lines like hit perfectly. You just,
That's cool.
quickly draw and then go after and clean up all the little stragglers that are sticking out past where they should be.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
And
neat.
then
Yeah.
yeah. And so the way that the vector layers work is it's still raster strokes, but it's over a vector spline. So you can go back and edit that spline and it'll move the stroke along with it. And
Oh,
that
wow. How
also
cool.
then still allows you to do a small file. Say you don't have the best computer, do a small illustration, but you can export it at 10 feet by 10 feet and it'll appropriately expand everything.
Wow, that's actually really clever.
Yeah.
I can see how
It's a
that would
delight.
be. Yeah, I can see how that would be useful, especially for like logos and such.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do a lot of, I guess a good example is I do a lot of tarot decks and illustrations and things like that
Okay.
involve line work. And I always do those at 1200 DPI because I want to make my file like the thing that I'm illustrating, I want it to be in the correct ratio of how the card will be printed, but I want to have the opportunity to print it as a big 18 by 24 poster after the fact. So even though it's 1200 DPI, using the vector lines doesn't bog down the computer or anything. So
yeah, because if you're trying to make a 3 feet by 4 foot thing, and it was all raster, that would get gigantic.
Yeah.
Your little computer would start smoking.
Another great feature is you can import 3D models into Clip Studio Paint, such as they have posable characters. So you can do little poses, adjust the camera angle, and then draw on top of them. So that's quite helpful
cool.
if you needed to have those references right there. You can also have a little window pop up that is just your color palette. So you can mix colors over there and then pick colors from that. There's also a mobile app, so you can do that same thing from your phone. Just turn your phone screen into a color palette. You just tap on different colors, blend them with your finger, and then on the computer it'll instantly pick up whatever color you tapped. You can also program short keys and buttons to your phone so that you just tap it on your phone and it changes the control on your computer. And aside from that, they also make a little handheld device that I use. And you can also program a Nintendo Switch controller to work with Clip Studio Paint to program tools and stuff into all that.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it just connects through Bluetooth and it's pretty awesome. And those are just some of the features.
It's this episode brought to you by Clip Studio Paint. No, it's been a few years. I'm gonna have to look at that program again.
Yeah, the interface is very much inspired by Photoshop, so it's incredibly easy to transition if you needed to, and it's way cheaper. But I mean, I still have Photoshop, but
yeah, I actually I started my digital learning on Photoshop, and then after a few years, I branched out and tried a bunch of different programs, and then for one reason or another, I came back to Photoshop. And I'm always kind of open to trying new things. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out and give it a shot. Plus, it
One
just gets
thing that they
expensive, you know.
yeah. Well, one thing they also recently added to Clip Studio Paint, I don't know if Photoshop does this, but realistic color blending. And so that you've probably noticed this if you ever make a gradient in Illustrator, for example, because the colors on a wheel, like if you go from say blue to yellow, it's going to cross through gray in the middle of the wheel, which will sometimes
Uh-huh.
give you a inaccurate gradient. And
Oh.
Clip Studio Paint and Photoshop, I don't know if Photoshop still does, but it used to be, color blending would do the same thing. It would not be like yellow to green to blue, or yellow to green to blue. It would be like yellow to kind of a grayish to blue. And they ended
Oh,
up doing
gotcha.
more like pigment based blending
Uh-huh.
on the colors, which really adds a lot of life to images that like you only notice it when it's not there kind of a thing. It's hard
Hmm.
to describe, but it's really fun to see it in action. You can also
Hmm.
combine multiple brushes into one. So say for example you could have a watercolor with a gouache on top, and you
Hmm.
could choose how they interact, whether it's randomization or based on pressure. So that's fun.
Hmm. That's cool. Yeah, it's been a few years. I'm gonna
Anyways,
have to check that program out again.
so
That's cool.
enough about Clip Studio Paint for a while. Let me ask you this. What is your
uh,
default when starting a new illustration? Like what sizes? Do you use inches? Do you use what DPI?
I always use inches, and
Mhm.
I always use 600 DPI. That's just because that's what's comfortable to me, and I change it accordingly, you know, for each client if they need. Most people don't need anything different. I have like one client who always wants their line work at like 1400 DPI or something like that,
Mm,
um, which is, you know, not a problem. My computer handles it fine. But it's just not an issue because um, 99% of the work I do is an image printed in a book, you know, and
right.
since it's all the same output, you know, it allows me to kind of standardize the way I work. So, and I have um, in Photoshop, you know, you go File, New, and I have some like pre-programmed stuff, you know, like A5 letter size. So that way, all the DPI and the sizes are set up. So I just click the one I want, and then boom, I'm ready to go.
Okay. So I guess you're usually doing like more or less 8 by 10 at 600 DPI.
Yeah, yeah. For some reason, I get a lot of half and quarter page illustrations. So it'll be, you know, whatever half of that is. So a lot of A5 stuff and things like that. And I think
Interesting.
it's
Okay.
I think it's mostly the clients that I work with are in like the the zine community. You know, and zines are
Right.
usually about A5. So, you know, just I usually work somewhere around that size. So, I
Yeah.
used to whatever they wanted, whatever size they wanted, I would just create a 300 DPI document and then like double the size. You know, so if they wanted a half page, I would make it full page and then just shrink it down. But that was just like a step or two extra. So basically, what I ended up doing is I double the DPI and keep it the same size, and then that way it still packs in all that detail and still looks good.
Yeah. I guess that's similar to what I said. Like I'll do an actual tarot sized document, but at 1200.
Hmm.
So I have
Yeah,
plenty
and
of
that
freedom to
gives you the freedom to
expand.
blow it up. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
What are you
And it kind
drawing
of all
with? Is it
depends on.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
What kind of equipment are you drawing with? XP pen or
Oh,
Wacom?
yeah. I have an XP pen, I think it's 22E Pro or something like that, and it's kind of for those that don't know, it's kind of like the less expensive version of the Wacom uh, Cintiq. So it's a big giant screen that I can draw on, and it plugs into my laptop.
I bought an XP pen. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it had a monitor on it. I think I paid like $600 or $800 for it. I was so excited, and within like an hour of using it, I hated it. Mostly because before that I was using the Surface Pro 6, which is small monitor, but the
Yeah.
resolution on that tablet was so much better than what I had on that XP Pen monitor. Plus, the
Huh.
parallax was pretty bad on it too. Like when you're drawing on the tablet, the stroke is almost immediately where the tip is.
Yeah.
But on that XP pen monitor, it was like maybe half a millimeter or maybe even a full millimeter away. So it was harder to like get in those small areas and predict where the stroke is going to begin. Plus, it didn't allow for the hand gestures that I was used to, like pinching to zoom and double tapping to undo, things like that, which I can do with Clip Studio Paint. So I returned that and then just upgraded to the Windows Surface Pro, which I adore. It's super powerful. The screen pops down over the keyboard, and it's still a full, powerful laptop, but I can do all my illustration on it.
I actually had a Surface Pro also a few years ago, um, and I really liked it. It was just a good drawing experience. I think the only thing I didn't like about it was that it was small, and it was just kind of hard to, click the things I needed to click sometimes. But the actual drawing experience was really nice.
Well, the Surface Studio Pro or Surface Pro Studio I'm using now is, I think, 15-inch screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's way
Mm-hmm.
bigger than the Surface Pro that I was using
Yeah.
before. But I mean, ideally, I want the giant.
Yeah.
Windows makes this giant. I'm sure you've seen it. It's this
Yeah.
giant tablet computer that's like a 3:4 ratio, but they haven't updated it in years, so it's got super old technology in it. But
That's a bummer.
anyways, I'm very happy
Yeah.
with what I have, and I love being mobile with my full studio. So I can go to a coffee shop, do an illustration, edit video, render 3D things, all on my
Yeah.
tablet. Which is, I mean, my laptop that converts to a tablet. So no complaints
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, when I first started out, I had a little Wacom bamboo tablet, and it was like, I think it was like 6 by 8 or something ridiculously small. And then,
That's what mine
from
was.
there, yeah, it's great for when you're starting out. It's a perfect entry model. And from there, I went to like a Surface Pro, and then Surface Pro, I went to the XP pen that I have now, and that's starting to get a little old. So I'm wondering if I'm going to go back to the non-screen type, but I haven't decided yet.
Do you find a benefit to that?
It's funny. I like both of them for different reasons. It's I don't know. It's hard to explain because it's kind of it's a feel. It's a feel thing, and I definitely like having the screen to draw on because it really feels in my brain. It feels like drawing on paper or something. But for some reason, drawing on just like the pad tablet thing and looking at the screen, it's like I think my brain is just maybe trained to enjoy that more, and I don't really know why. Yeah, maybe because that's how I started, So
Well,
that's what
I
my brain
understand
wants.
that
I don't know.
I understand that it might be more comfortable for your neck to be looking ahead, but it's not
Yeah.
comfortable for your arm to have your arm up in the air as you're drawing. So I could
Yeah.
see that being a factor.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. Over the years I've had to learn to like, if I sit in one position for too long, I get like cramps in my back, and it's made me actually a little more healthy because I have to force myself to get up and move. Whereas if I'm too comfortable on drawing, I'll just sit there for 4 or 5 hours straight, and then I wonder why I stand up and I feel like an old man.
I've got this one thing that I bought that's been a huge lifesaver. It's like it's hard to describe. It's like an arm cradle that clamps to your desk. So if I need to move like my hand from, say, mouse to keyboard, this little cradle just slides around because it's like all hinged and it feels like some type of old medical device, but it just keeps your elbow supported throughout the entire use of your arm moving around your workspace. And that has really saved me. So when I'm like at my mom's house for the week or something, I don't have that with me, I get carpal tunnel very easily. But that thing really saves all the fatigue. I'll send you a link to it. It's like $30 and it's a lifesaver.
In my head, it looks very big and clunky. Like, do you remember the guns from Aliens? And they had that like pivot thing, and you know what I mean? Like that's how I picture you drawing. I picture you have to like strap into your desk, and then you have this giant like arm that moves around. And I'm going to
No,
be really disappointed. I'm going to be really disappointed if you send me a link and it's something like very nicely designed and slim. I really hope it's just ridiculous and all over the place.
we'll get ready for the disappointment then.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, how do you send and collect your invoices?
PayPal. I use
Okay.
PayPal for everything. It's honestly, it's just what I started with, and it never really gave me any problems, so I just stuck with it. I think that similar to using Facebook Messenger, one of the benefits to PayPal is that it's so widely used. So, if I say, "Hey, I need to PayPal you," 9 times out of 10, that's not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
There's only like a very small percentage of people who they can't or won't use PayPal for whatever reason, but um, like I said, it doesn't give me any headaches, so I just keep using it.
If they can't use PayPal, it's probably because they're planning on scamming you and they've already been kicked off PayPal for scamming someone else.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Or they're trying to do some weird, can I pay you in this form or whatever? No, please PayPal.
I use Square to send all my invoices. And
That's
that's,
a good one.
I guess, primarily because I already use Square I do a lot of in person markets. And so I use
Yeah.
Square to collect payments at those events. So I've already
Yeah.
got like my hourly rate up in there, my half-hour rate up
Uh,
there. So yeah, I'm just used to
that
using
makes
that
sense because
Square
Square is good
interface.
for those kind of in-person transactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do wish you could like attach the files to your Square invoice, but the only thing you
Mm.
can really attach is your logo. So it's got like a 5 megabyte limit. So that's why I
Oh,
just put in the Google Drive link. It would be
yeah.
nice too if you could program it to send the link after the invoice is paid.
Hmm.
Maybe they do have that feature. It's just been so long since I messed with it. I just put it in the description of the invoice. Anyway.
Oh, that's funny. I never even thought about using the invoice to deliver the file or a link because what I do is I send them the invoice, and then when that's paid, um, I drop the Google Drive link into Facebook Messenger.
Mm. I
But you
like
know
being
what?
able to say to people, like,
Mm,
if they say, "Hey, how do I get the file?" I'll just be like, "It's in the invoice I sent." It
it's
sounds
right
nice
here.
saying that.
Yeah, yeah. Plus, I realize since I'm working with a lot of repeat customers, they already have the link to their own file because it's the same folder they've been using for the past year. So it's usually already taken care of.
Well, why don't you tell me a bit about the role playing game you're designing, since you're kind of
Oh,
stepping
sure.
out from just the illustration side now.
Yeah, yeah. So it's called TLD RPG, and it's kind of a play on words because
Great name.
yeah, thank you. It's funny about like 50% of the people get the joke, and the other half are like, "What does that mean?" But there's an internet acronym, TLDR, stands for Too Long Didn't Read, and it's basically just a way to summarize, like a long post or something. Hey, if you don't want to read my whole rant, TLDR, here's my point in one sentence. So I set out to design a role playing game that was uh, rules light or minimalist, depending on how you want to look at it. It started off as a 2-page document. So I thought, hey, this is kind of like my summary of the role playing game experience. So quick and to the point. So let's call it TLD RPG. Um, that was one of the first things that I came up with, and it stuck. So yeah, that was kind of neat. As far as the game itself, it's a classless, rules light system, and it's designed to be kind of really quick and easy, and you can just jump in, and you don't have to learn a whole bunch of rules, and you can just have fun with your friends. Because I think that a lot of games just have too much stuff in them, and
Agreed.
one of the points of role playing games to me is um, player agency. Like if everything is spelled out, it almost feels like you're not playing a game. It's almost like you're running a simulation. And I was trying to design a system that would help facilitate that feeling of I have agency, I'm making decisions that matter, and the story changes depending on what I do. So I tried to design a system that kind of gets out of your way and just lets you have fun with the game.
So when you're putting this together, is it just the rule set, or are you also designing a world, a campaign setting? What kind of product do you envision for this?
So I kickstarted the project about 6 months ago, and actually I'm starting to do the final steps of like delivering the PDF while I'm waiting on print copies, and so those will go out soon. But as far as the
Oh,
product, there's a there's the basic core rule set, and then I also designed a short adventure to go with it. And I wrote the adventure, I threw the map, and then came up with a bunch of creatures and things like that to go in it. So that way you could just grab this book and sit down and have everything you need. Or if you want, this book could really be plugged into kind of any system. And in fact, there was an actual play that was done on YouTube with I don't know if you're familiar with the group Wandering Monster. They have a really good
I
YouTube channel.
am.
Okay, they
Yeah,
actually
I
did.
follow their podcast. Yeah.
Oh, they're really great guys, and they actually
Mm-hmm.
did a live play using TLV, and then they just combined it with a setting. I don't remember which one, but a setting written by someone else, and they just kind of said, "We're doing this mission, but we're using this rule set," and it worked really well. So I really liked that. I
Wow.
like that you could just kind of sit down and do what you want with it. And again, that kind of goes back to my philosophy regarding games is that they shouldn't get in your way. They should facilitate playing instead of hinder playing.
Wow, that's very exciting. So the campaign that or the adventure you're putting together, is it
Mm-hmm.
fantasy, or is it like a whole new thing you're designing from the ground up?
Well, it's definitely fantasy based. The book itself and the game itself definitely you can tell grows out of a fantasy, like a love of fantasy. There's goblins and things like that and magic spells. But one of my plans, hopefully, is if this is popular enough that I could adapt it to other genres. And I mean, honestly, I don't see why someone couldn't take TLD RPG as it is and just say, let's run a sci-fi campaign or something like that. You would just have to
Sure.
kind of rework it around the edges, but the base system itself is actually pretty lean and able to kind of just do what it needs to do without a lot of trappings. So it's actually a D6 dice pool based system, and that was uh, deliberate from the beginning because one of the things that was important to me about making this game was to try to make it very approachable. So it kind of goes back to the idea that like some games just have too much in them and too much explanation necessary. So if you hold up a D6 and you show it to someone, they're going to know what it is, and they're going to know how to use it, because it's dice. Everybody knows dice. But if I hold up like, oh, here's a D8 and here's a D20 and whatever, oh, and here's a D100 chart, it's like that requires explanation, and those things um, they're a bar to entry to some people. So one of the design constraints that I put upon myself in the beginning was make this game very approachable so that you don't end up just creating some other, 300-page game that's dense and nobody wants to play.
Mm.
So
So
yeah,
for the
that
print
was
versions
mhm. Go ahead.
for the print versions you said you're sending out, did you fund those through a campaign, or you just had them for sale somewhere? How did you pull that off?
Yeah, I ran a Kickstarter campaign, and that is going to pay for the the print run, basically. And excuse me, I ran a Kickstarter to pay for the print run, and that's going ahead full steam right now, and should be hopefully being started to being delivered this month.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm taking a look at it, but for some reason the page isn't loading for me. Found it in the
Uh-oh.
Google results. All right, here we go. Okay.
And by the time this interview goes live, I'll actually put a link on my personal website that says, like, click here to buy my game. So they'll be able to go to billyblueart.com and they'll be able to click a link and buy my game.
Oh, I don't know why I missed this. That is a gorgeous banner image. I always get suckered into I always get sucked into projects based on the banner image. And when I was looking at your website earlier, I saw that it looks kind of like a Bat Boy from Weekly World News. I love that little goblin character.
Oh, it totally does. I forgot about that guy. Yeah. For all of your listeners, the big image is like a bat goblin hybrid, and if you see that image, it's kind of a good summary of my art style, but also a good summary of the game itself. It's kind of gritty and in your face, and kind of really jumps off the page and says, "Hey, look at me!"
So I could see you. You're off. No, sorry, you do it.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the benefits to being an artist who is making my own game, I was able to pack a lot of artwork in there, and of course get the artwork exactly the way I wanted. For those that don't know, when you make a project like this, the artwork is usually one of, if not the biggest expenses. And that's why, just to put it nicely, that's why sometimes the artwork is not so great in some of the very smaller operations, because they just can't afford, to get a lot of good artwork. So they'll go to newer artists, or, they'll try to do it themselves. So kind of we talked about before about that sales point mentality, I thought, hey, I'm an artist. This is usually a big expense for a project. So push that gas pedal and pack as much really cool imagery in there, because that's going to help set you apart from other people who they just can't afford to commission, 50 different cool images, and all it costs me is my time.
I know exactly what you mean. Every time I'm putting together a Kickstarter campaign, I load it with graphics, and as I'm doing it, I'm like, I am so thankful I know how to do this. If I had to wait 48 hours for some other artist to just give me like a little text banner, I would be so frustrated. But the fact that I could just spend like 4 or 5 dedicated hours and build out a gorgeous Kickstarter page, I love that I can do that. I mean, it's taken years to be able to do that in 4 or 5 hours.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's that old story about Picasso, where someone says, "Oh, hey, can I get a drawing from you?" And he kind of whips up this drawing in like 30 seconds, and hands it to the person. And they say, "Oh my God, how did you do that drawing so fast? It only took you 30 seconds." And he says, "That drawing didn't take me 30 seconds. That drawing took me 30 years." And the whole point is, it takes years of hard work to get to the point where you are now. So, me being able to pack all that cool artwork in there, it's a sign that I have put in the years of work before that, just to be able to do that kind of work for myself.
I love that mock-up you have of the book with the white cover and that grinning, blood-dripping face.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Is that what the final product is going to look like, or did it change since the campaign?
No. Actually, that is one of the very first images that I sketched out for the cover, and I loved it, and it just kind of worked. So I just brought it to final, and it's stuck ever since. Yeah, I was actually just reviewing print files the other day before yesterday, and yeah, it looks good, man. And I made a kind of a weird choice, because for the people listening, he's describing the front cover is white, first of all, and there's like the bottom half of a face kind of coming down from the top of the page, and it's real gross looking. and it looks like a goblin or something like that, or that kind of, you can kind of picture it in your head, and there's like blood dripping out of the mouth. And I made kind of an interesting choice because I chose not to put the title on the front cover. It's on the spine, and it's all over the inside of the book and the back of the book. But I did that deliberately because I wanted to say this book and this game is a work of art, and it's something that grabs your eyeballs and you want to look at it more. And so I just kind of approached the cover image as not necessarily a cover, but just as a resting piece of artwork.
Well, you definitely nailed that goal.
Oh,
I do recommend, if you do a campaign like this again, put that core book at the top of the Kickstarter page.
That's a
at
good
the top
idea.
of the story. Yeah. One thing I've learned is if you have your money shot right at the top, that'll draw people in more than them initially seeing like the title and description of what it is the campaign is.
Yeah,
You want
really
them
good
to
advice.
see what you want them to pledge for.
TLDR, here's my book.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, exactly. So was this this was your first campaign, and you've backed 28, so nice.
Yeah,
you did
have I?
good
That's
success
funny.
on the first one.
Don't tell my wife. This is my first campaign, and it's my first designed game. So I was very nervous, but also very pleasantly surprised that people were so supportive. And I'm really excited for people to get it in their hands and start playing it, so I can hear what they think about it. All the feedback that I've gotten so far has been really helpful and positive. And I've been play testing it for off and on for about a year, so it feels pretty sturdy. But yeah.
Well, I think it took me 7 Kickstarter projects before I broke $1,000. And you broke 2,000 on your first one, so that's a good,
close to 3.
Yeah, it's a good trend. Aside from the book and aside from the commissions, do you have any other sources of income that you have or you're working on having as an artist? I mean,
I have all of these things that I keep saying I'm going to do and I'm going to release, and then I just get distracted with the commissions. But now that I'm finishing up the book, because that was my main one, I want to move on to creating a Patreon or something like that. I want to, and it's like you talked about earlier, I can do a job once and get paid, or I can do a job once and get paid many times for it. So I'm trying to, the book and also something like a stock art Patreon is an attempt to create these like semi-passive income streams. And I think one of the things that would go over really well is a Patreon service where every month I release, X amount of pieces, and you can do whatever you want with them. I think that my style is interesting enough where I think that people would say like, oh, I want to put this in my game. It looks different and gets people's attention. And a lot of the clients that I work with who do they publish their own books and they do that kind of stuff regularly. They have told me, yeah, man, if you make a stock art service or stock art Patreon or something like that, we'd be very interested. So they always need work, so I might as well make work that can be purchased more than once.
So I sell a good amount of, I guess I don't want to say sell. I have I could do better, an okay income from Adobe stock photos. Whenever I go out, take photos around town, the nicer ones I put up on Adobe stock. And, I probably average maybe $10 a month. Nothing crazy, but that's $10 I didn't have. I know with Adobe stock, you can sell licensing of illustrations through it, and the cut you get is way better than the cut you get from photos. And I've been meaning to just force myself to spend one day going through my illustrations and seeing which ones would be good candidates for it and upload them to that. So that might be a good thing to look at for any of the listeners who are looking to make money with stock illustrations.
Yeah, and
also,
for anyone...
episode 2 of my podcast is a conversation with someone who does have a Patreon that is supplying her custom illustrations to it. So some
That's
helpful
cool.
information there too, as far as interacting with the audiences you build through Patreon.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a big one to me is that if you do a Patreon, you're creating a little community, and that
Mm-hmm.
really appeals to me because I like interacting with people in certain ways. Like I said before, being face to face with human beings is sometimes anxiety inducing, but interacting with them through a screen or through a digital community is actually really gratifying for me. Um, I I just really like sharing information and sharing work and sharing encouragement and things like that. So the idea of creating my own community where we can do all that stuff and just kind of also make a little money on the side, like that really appeals to me. So
Sure.
that's going to be my next big project. I I have another game planned, but I'm telling myself to get the Patreon rolling before I start my next game. Otherwise, it will just distract me. So,
Yeah, I get that. I think as an artist, as a modern day artist, you really kind of have to open yourself up to shotgunning different revenue streams. You can't just kind of
mhm,
exist as just one thing.
yeah,
I mean, you could, but it takes a lot more dedication when it's easier to have different sources of income and then nurture the ones that work and figure out why others are not working.
hmm,
It's always fun to go back and reflect on where that is.
yeah,
And so, if anyone wants to see your art or
hmm,
soon buy your new book, they can find you at billyblueart.com. And
hmm,
on Instagram, you're also billyblueart.com on Instagram, as
hmm,
well as on Facebook,
hmm,
billyblueart.com spelled DOTCOM.
hmm.
All right. Is there anything else you want to send people to?
I think that's good for now. Just I'm I'm very approachable and I'm very kind of willing to talk to people. So if anyone has any questions about anything I've talked about today, hit me up. I'm always willing to chat. Or, hey, maybe you listening to this, maybe you're an artist and you have questions about your artwork or about the business of your artwork, let me know. And I don't know everything, but whatever I do know, I'm willing to share. Yeah.
Awesome. On that very supportive note, thank you so much, Billy, for joining me.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Hopefully there are no technical difficulties with the first half, but we'll
Yep,
see.
we'll see. All
Yeah.
right, thank you. And I'll
All
definitely be
right.
able to bring you on at some point in the future, too.
Oh, it sounds great.
Art for Profit's Sake is recorded through Riverside FM, distributed through Spotify for podcasters, and edited on Adobe Audition. The music is provided by Old Romans. If you learned anything useful or found this podcast helpful, please rate and review us 5 stars. If you want to learn more about me or my art, head over to chainassembly.com.